Clinton versus Trump. We're talking about the fate of human civilization.
Yes.
I say this to this day, and I believe with all my heart that the people who voted for Trump in 2016 did the greatest act of human charity and maybe human history, because tens of millions would have died had Hillary Clinton won. The table was set for World War III with Russia. We were able to delay that. Anybody who tells you don't shelter your kids, groomer. Shelter your kids. Why are you telling me not to shelter my kids?
It's like, say, don't lock your doors at night. Really? Okay, you're an armed robber.
Oh, that's weird. Don't shelter my kids, huh? Okay. We appealed to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York. This is during the Trump administration. Epstein is still free, hasn't been arrested. A friend of mine, one of the good guys in the intelligence community, said, hey, just so you know, you shouldn't mention Epstein anymore. You're in a real problem. And they go, you got into something really that you didn't know what you were getting into. And I go, okay, what do you want to do? They go, just stand by. You need to not draw attention to this issue or yourself. And I said, okay, that's message received.
How do you live on the internet without having it destroy your brain?
I went through that in 2017, and where I felt like my brain was becoming a little bit dopamine fried. Yeah. So for me, I just said, I'll just do less. And I went to DC less, and I did less of, I made myself irrelevant in a way. So there was a point where I was on a real arc to be a big deal. And then my brain was getting fried. I looked at videos of myself. My face was all red. I was just had this inflammation because of cortisol. And I was getting calls from people in DC 3 or 4 in the morning. And I was breaking a bunch of stories. So I was like, oh, phone, kids. And I realized I was losing myself to this world, this digital world.
Yes.
And then I go, man, I don't want to, this sucks, dude. I'm going to have to figure something out.
Can I ask you, what do you mean it's cortisol? What does that mean?
A stress hormone. So when you're under stress, fight or flight response, you're going to have cortisol, and then cortisol is inflammatory. And then that's what makes a lot of people who maybe are healthy look a little stressed out, because you bloat, you hold water.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that go with it. So a lot of people, when you leave a high stress job, people will be, oh, I lost 10 pounds. No, you lost about 5 or 10 pounds of water.
Yeah.
Because you're not, the buzz.
Right.
Oh, I gotta respond to that.
Wait, so you felt like you were succeeding too much?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, objectively. Yeah, and then...
Most people fret about not being successful enough.
Yeah, but it's how you define your spiritual world, or how you define what you want to do with life. And I noticed that I got tired of people, like, for example, like me doing this episode with you. I almost didn't do it because I go, oh man, I'm going to have a bunch of people texting me. How do I get on Tucker? What's Tucker's number? Can you get this thing to
Everyone
Tucker?
has my number.
Yeah, no, I know. But the people
like everyone on the planet has my number.
But they're so incapable, they can't find it.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Well,
then my DMs will be blowing up. And that was the problem, is people, oh, get this to Don Jr. I saw that you were a thing where Don Jr. is. Get this to Trump. And I go, no, man, this is not really what it's about. So the only real way to describe how I ended up in this weird world was it was a gonzo, it was a ride. It wasn't a deliberate, calculated move. How can I become a whatever? Because I was an influencer before there was a term influencer. I was recognized in public for what I wrote on the internet. This is before you could make any money doing it. Yeah. This was before there were brand deals. This was just people had blogs, or people on social media blowing off steam or goofing off or whatever. And so I was very early to what's now known as an influencer.
But so you start, I mean, you had a completely different life. You're a lawyer. You live in California, but you're not from there. You're not basically where you thought you would be 20 years ago. But you start succeeding in this new world. But I still don't understand how it came to you that you don't want to be as successful as you are.
Well, I decided I wanted to become irrelevant. And the reason is because
that's the opposite of what most people want.
Right. I wanted to be, I have a story about this. I won't say who it is, but I was having dinner with a friend of mine, and I was working on my next book, which was called Audacity: How to Go from Nobody to Somebody. And it was a discussion of, again, influencing before people knew them as influencers. And it was about brand building, getting your message out, rhetoric. And I was having dinner with my friend and he goes, you know what? By the time you finish this book, you're not going to publish it and you're going to call it How to Become a Nobody. And I kind of laughed and said, oh, ha, ha, ha. He was right. I never released the book. And
well, you wrote the book, but didn't publish it?
Yeah. Just felt it was too vainglorious, felt it was too self-celebratory. I felt like my ego was seeking external validation too much. And then I was losing who I was and losing what I wanted to do. And because my whole philosophy is.
Wait, how did you come to that? Did your wife mention it to you or?
No.
A quiet moment, you realized you were going to become a worse person? You
feel it. Subtle little things and little gestures. You would Google your name. I don't have a Google alert on my name. I don't know anything. People occasionally will send me this. Have you seen this? No. And I'm not trying to act like I'm too cool for school, but I don't do that because you'd Google your name. You'd name search yourself on Twitter. What are people saying? Do I got to respond to this? And you become a brand, not a person, right? Or you become an account. That's how they refer to people on X, formerly known as Twitter. Oh, that's an account. And I say, no, but that's what happens. You lose your humanity and you're no longer humanity. You're more like a cyborg, or you're living in an augmented reality of social media where you, whoever you are, doesn't exist. And you're engaging in some kind of performative dance for a mob of people who don't necessarily have your best interest in mind.
Wait, who's that completely crazed chick who has the mental breakdowns on camera? I think she works at the Washington Post. She's from Greenwich.
Yeah. Taylor Lorenz.
Yeah. Who's on one hand is loathsome, but every time I've ever seen her, maybe I have too many daughters. I feel so sorry for her because she's clearly been destroyed by what you're describing.
Oh, a lot of people do. There's a certain look some people have when they're in front of a camera and this is where they want to be, right? They ham it up for the camera.
Yeah.
And I had always been the opposite. So for me, my biggest, if I had an influence on this, it was, I don't know if you ever watched him, Dr. Eugene Scott on satellite radio.
Well, Dr. Eugene Scott from my childhood in California.
Oh, there you go. Even better. The University Cathedral.
Yeah, the public access guy who would sit in a chair.
Get on the telephone.
And yell at viewers?
Yes.
When I was in like 6th or 7th grade, my brother and I would fire up a bowl and watch Dr. Gene. And he hated his viewers. He would say, you're disgusting. I told you to send me money. And his phone banked behind him. Yep. That's the guy.
The Voices of Faith.
He was incredible.
Yeah, I grew up. So we had a bootleg satellite radio transmitter and we picked up Dr. Eugene Scott, and he's probably the greatest influence on me and how I do media, because I'll go on these rants.
By the way, is anyone listening to this or watching this? Just hit pause, go onto YouTube. Is he on? Are there tapes of him?
Oh, yeah.
He's got to be long dead.
Yeah. Yeah, he died years ago. One of my life's regrets is I never went to the University Cathedral before he died. And that was one of my memento mori moments.
So because his affect, his way of communicating was like so strange. Mm-hmm. How was he an influence on you? You seem much less strange.
Okay, he sits around reading books, the most obscure knowledge, and would go down these deep rabbit holes that nobody really cared about. And then, am I boring you? Am I boring you? And he would scream, am I boring you? Do you want to hear more? Get on the telephones. And then they have these horse videos because he was a horseman. And you just see these horses videos. And I thought, this is the coolest mofo that I've ever seen in my life. This guy's amazing. And he was a PhD. He's a brilliant guy, genius guy. He'd know all this trivia. And I thought, man, that's cool. I kind of want to be that guy when I grow up. And
did anyone else on your block want to be Dr. Gene Scott?
I don't know that anybody in the world wanted to be Dr.
No one in the world.
I don't know that anyone else but me found in this to be an aspirational character. And I would watch him for hours a week, especially because it was the only thing that because we were a very strict household, what we could watch. My dad would let me watch him forever. So for me, that was one of the few things that I could watch, and I could watch it with my dad. And I was obsessed with his delivery style. I thought it was cool that he just sat around and read books. Because if you think about it, when people go, what do you do for a living? And the answer is that I read books and write about what I read and what I find interesting. That's it. And there's no more there to it than that, but there's a lot of there if you look at it in that context. So he would be framed by piles of books, and it would be the most weird stuff, at least growing up in a small town, books she'd never heard of. We didn't have Amazon.com back then. And I thought that'd be cool. Just sit around, read books, talk shit, yell at people who are watching you, scream, go on tirades, smoke cigars. Where do I sign up for this? How do I do this for a living?
Watching it was almost like a masochistic experience because he hated you, but he commanded your attention and then told you to send him money, and a lot of people did.
Well, I don't know that he hated you as much as because I grew up watching pro wrestling too. I viewed it more as a bit because I think that he had a genuine smiley effect to him. And I think that he was happy and enjoying what he was doing. I viewed it much less that he had contempt for his audience, but more that he was a rabble rouser and he was doing a bit of a pro wrestling bit. He was a heel. He was an intellectual heel. So if you look at Ric Flair, was Ric Flair a good guy or bad guy? Well, Ric Flair didn't hate the audience, right? The bad guys would run in. The Iron Sheik would run in, cussing people out. He didn't hate his audience. That was his bit, right? So Dr. Eugene Scott, that was his bit. He was a heel, an intellectual heel, and he was having fun. And I think the audience was in on it. And if the audience is in on the bit, then it becomes fun.
No, that's a much deeper reading than I was capable of giving it, but I think you're right. So you decide to disappear, become less relevant. How do you do that? And did it work?
Absolutely worked. I don't have people asking me to find out how to get in touch with anybody in the Trump campaign or anybody who.
It sounds like you just pulled back from politics then.
Well, less I pulled back from politics, I did less video. And I thought one of my epiphanies was I was reading a book, and because it goes both ways. So I don't know if you've ever gone to a modern bookstore anymore, but it's pretty depressing. And then you'll see a book and you'll see the author is some crank on Twitter that is a completely not credible person. So I can't read history books anymore because I read these historians on X. And I go, oh, they're lying about Trump. I can't listen to a Dan Carlin podcast, Hardcore History. I can't listen to any of this because when you read what they're writing about contemporaneous events, you realize there's nothing about them that you can trust in any of their storytelling.
I agree with that.
And then I reached another epiphany where I was reading. I like Paulo Coelho books a lot. And he's famous for The Alchemist, but he's written a bunch of other little side quest books. I read Hippie recently. And I thought, I don't know what this guy looks like. I wouldn't know if I saw this guy in public. I don't really care what he had for dinner, but I like his books. And then I thought, I want to be more of a book as a metaphor. I'm a book. You read my X account. You scroll, you read it. That's interesting. You get mad because I maybe word things in a way that you don't like, but you don't really care that much about me, the person, right? It's more the words. Whereas when I was doing a lot of live streams, a lot of videos, there becomes more of an emotional component to it because TV is way more powerful. Video is way more powerful than audio. Video is way more powerful than the written word.
But less enduring.
Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I thought, well, I'll do fewer streams because I would do these very popular live streams. And I just quit doing them. And I found that made me significantly less relevant.
But happier?
More content. There's a great book on the happiness hypothesis. I've studied the philosophers, I was a philosophy major in college. And I learned that happiness is a dragon, really. It's not a destination. It's more about it can only be obtained indirectly. So I think less about happiness. Yeah. And I kind of rejected that, are you happy? And more along the lines of, is it meaningful? Is it impactful? Is it significant? Is it having the desired outcome for the world and the desired outcome for me? And in that regard, much less relaxed, much less stressed out. I have much less cortisol pulsing through my bodies, that's for sure. And I can wind down easily. So for example, I can raw dog a hike 4 hours, and raw dogging a hike means no audiobook, no podcast, no radio, just me and my thoughts.
It's called raw dogging when you don't have electronics on you.
That's the new meme. When you can raw dog.
That's so pathetic.
You raw dog it, yeah. But that's how attached.
Like it's an achievement.
Well, we're all cyborgs now.
Not me.
Well,
I hate that shit.
Yeah, it's getting there. Yeah, but if you can do that for hours, that's where I don't wear headphones in the gym. So I did much less disconnecting from the augmented reality world or the virtual reality world and spent more time in physical world.
Raw dogging. I thought that was like no condom.
It is, but memes change and language usage change.
Amazing.
And that's
amazing.
What it means now,
What's going to happen in this election?
We don't know what's going to happen in November. There's no way to know.
If you're wondering how big tech got powerful enough to void the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, how to get big enough to nullify the founding documents of the most powerful company in the world, well, simple. They got really rich. Money is power. Well, how'd they get rich? From information. Your information, which you keep giving to them. How do you do that? Well, every time you use the internet unprotected, you're handing all of your online activity, all the details about you, to Silicon Valley, which sells it, including to government agencies, which use it to spy on you. That's why it's probably not a good idea to go online unprotected, not just for your own sake, but for the sake of the country. How do you fight back? Well, with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN is an app that encrypts and reroutes 100% of your network traffic through secure servers. What does that do? Well, it makes everything you do online unreadable to your internet provider and then to data brokers and to the government agencies that buy that data. That means anyone out there trying to profit from you and your personal data can't. Well, how do we know it works? Well, we know for a fact it works because this winter, when my producers and I were in Russia conducting interviews, including with the president of that country, internet traffic was getting blocked by the government. So we got an ExpressVPN account and were able to get that interview out of the country securely and bring it to the world. So it works. We know it works. ExpressVPN also keeps you safe from hackers, even on unsecured public Wi-Fi networks. If you're in a coffee shop or an airport, you sign on with ExpressVPN and all of a sudden you're safe. And by the way, it's easy to use, even for people who don't know anything about tech like me. You just tap one button and you're protected on any device. That's your iPhone, your laptop, your tablet, you name it. If you've got it, ExpressVPN can protect it, and it works on up to 8 devices at once. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. ExpressVPN protected our team for censorship across the world, and it can protect you too. So if you want to keep your privacy intact and fight back against the big tech surveillance machine, now is the time to get ExpressVPN. Use our special link to get 3 extra months of ExpressVPN for free. Go to expressvpn.com/Tucker. That's ExpressVPN.com/Tucker for 3 extra months free, and we hope you will.
I mean, if that's correct, that's so dark. I almost don't want to dwell on it, but then that's why it would be fine if Biden stayed then.
Well, we want Biden to run in November. I think he's the weakest candidate that we can have, but there's a new enthusiasm happening, knowing that if Biden stays in the race, they have to save Biden because now there's real peril. People took it for granted that Biden was going to win, Democrat voters especially, and now they're thinking that he might not win, and that'll drive more Democrat voter turnout. It's going to be hotly contested, man. It's going to be hotly contested. People saying Trump's up 2 on this poll, Trump's up 3 on this poll. None of that matters. It's going to be a hotly contested election, and people are getting lackadaisical.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a huge scramble in Washington to well, I want to be secretary of this or secretary of that, or I mean, they're acting like it's done. Yeah,
they're acting like they've won, which I don't like. There's a lot of congressional races that are close that people need to watch out for. Democrats might take the House. They think they're going to take the House. What's being done there? And unfortunately, not much. Unfortunately, people aren't running on the issues that they want to run on. So, for example, I was talking about this yesterday on X, and in Orange County, there's a real concern that Orange County could become like the Bolshevik-run Los Angeles County. So a guy Todd Spitzer ran for...
Which is right next door.
Mm-hmm, ran for district attorney. Todd Spitzer ran for district attorney. So
yeah,
in the district attorney election, the campaign slogan was "No LA and OC." He won by a 2-1 margin. Orange County.
What did he mean by that?
He meant no crime. No crime waves like they have in LA. Yeah. None of these homeless encampments. None of this bail reform, so-called. happening in Orange
Just
County.
lets criminals circulate.
Yeah, prosecute criminals, basic stuff. It's in a way you feel like mentally stunted that you have these conversations.
No, it's
right?
so true.
No, it's you're in a surreal parallel reality where you go, oh no, you see, the way to win Republicans is you want to enforce the criminal code against people who murder people. You want to actually put criminals in jail. And then you have these weird surrealist moments in yourself where you think, did I say that? Am I stupid? This is banal. Why are we talking about this?
It's right.
And you go, no, but it is banal. It's utterly stupid. And yet that's where we are as a society. So you do have to talk about it. You have to talk about it all the time. You have to remind people of this all of the time, because that is the dumb world that we live in. And it does feel sometimes demoralizing because you feel like you're talking below your intellect, right? As a writer, as a speaker, you want to talk about issues that interest you and that you find novel, right? Oh, I read this book. What's this book you read? What's that about? Oh, I went down that rabbit hole. That's cool. And so much of our time, unfortunately, has to be devoted to saying, okay, Republicans, crime is bad. People don't want crime. You're running. You need to talk about crime. And then you see them talking about everything but crime. And you think, no, okay, I have to grab you by the shirt.
But Todd Spitzer did talk about crime.
Yeah, and he won by 2-1 in a 50-50.
So I would think that every other Republican...
Well, ask Michelle Steele, ask these Orange County Congress members how much they're talking about crime. Ask them when's the last time they had a press conference about crime. Oh, but I'm running for Congress. It's a national issue. No, it's not. It's local, right? Running for Congress is not a national ballot referendum. It is a local election.
That's right.
Right? And they don't understand these things. And you think, how do you not understand these things? And then I think, I'm wasting so much of my time with mediocre people who either have no will or they really are this dumb. And what am I doing with my life? So that's where you have these existential crises.
Right. No, I've been there. But it's, why wouldn't you talk? I mean, crime, there's no defense of it at all. Mm-hmm. So, and you're a Republican, you don't have to be for crime. You're not for rape. So why wouldn't they talk about it? It can't just be stupidity. They feel pressure not to.
I think that they don't understand the issues in the way they should, and that they get too much caught up in the DC think tank realm. And I don't think that they're being told you can't really talk about crime. I think that in their gilded world, they don't understand what the issues really are concerning people. They don't have any kind of concept of how bad it is in certain parts. And I do think that they're afraid of the media attack. So when the Orange County district attorney ran for office, the media, of course, attacked him, smeared him, fascism, far right, this, that, but he overwhelmingly won. And as you know, Republicans are controlled by the media in terms of the narrative. They're so afraid of a hit piece, right? They're so afraid of negative press coverage that they allow the media to dictate the agenda to them.
Why would you let your enemies control you?
That's the philosophical question, right? That's the question is, why are Republicans so pathetic? And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I think that there's a strain of Christian naivety that people don't like to talk about, because then it seems like you hate Christians now, Cernovich. You're anti-Christian. And I say, no, if you read the verses in the Bible, they say you got to be gentle as a dove, but wise as a serpent, right? Everybody skips over that part. And you have to ask, where's the serpent type wisdom? Where are you not understanding these issues? Where are you not thinking? Where are you not being shrewd? And they aren't. They have this naivety, and they have this gullibility, and they have this weakness that comes from being too nice. So the biggest problem, one of Nietzsche's great criticisms of Christians that I think has held up well with the inversion of morality, and how Christians became a morality of a slave type morality, which is self-sacrifice, self-abnegation, denial of yourself. Well, in one way, these are good Christian virtues, which is, if you think your ego is getting out of control, it might be good to become a little bit less relevant. It might be good to take a step back from the limelight. These might be good things to do for your heart, but that doesn't mean you let somebody kick in the door and torture you to death, right? Or
rape your wife, or hurt the people you love,
or kill people, whatever the case is. Right. It doesn't. You don't let that end up like the czar, lined up against the wall with your family while the Bolsheviks kill you, right? There's too much of that strain of weakness that has infected a lot of the modern Christian traditions to where they don't have really an understanding of it. And they're the Ned Flanders, oh God, by golly, gee, can't we all get along kind of types. And then because of that, they're more open to being persuaded by evil forces because they don't have that strong grounding and that courage to stand up against evil.
Well, they certainly lack courage. What's evil? How are we defining evil?
We define evil as anti-human. If you start from, I like C.S. Lewis's take on this, which is whether it's true or not, I think is a good way to, by true, I mean whether it's a metaphor or it's literally true, people can debate. But if you think of the fall of the angels, and then you think of humanity, you would understand that the demons are at war with God's creations, humans, because humans still have God's love. Humans are still capable of experiencing divine grace and experiencing God's love, whereas the demons who rebelled during the fall are not. So what they want to do is implement anti-humanist policies and have human suffering and have human despair. And you can feel that force, again, whether it's a literal one involving actual forces or whether that's a metaphor, you could say the evil would be anti-human.
But I mean, it almost has to be a supernatural phenomenon because by definition, human beings would not be inclined to be anti-human. Animals don't act against their own interests.
Animals don't commit suicide. There's a lot of strange elements of the human condition, a lot of
that suggest outside forces that are not human acting on humans.
Yeah, humans give into despair in a way that animals don't. Despair would be incomprehensible to other animals.
What's that wonderful D.H. Lawrence poem? D.H. Lawrence has this great poem about watching a bird, it's 2 lines long, drop dead of cold and fall from the bough, dead to the ground, and not feel a moment of self-pity.
Right.
I mean, that is kind of the difference.
Right, that's us. I remember one time we hit a deer. I was with a friend, and the deer's back broke, and it just kept running to try to live, right? Yeah. Whereas a human would immediately think, oh, my life is over, right? So we have this fatalism in us. Something bad happens to us, and we define it in, oh, my life is over. No, it isn't. Your life's in a bad spot, right? It sucks. It might suck for a while, but your life is not over, right? So then what is that despair? So I think when I think about these terms and I think of what is evil or what I think is demonic, I think in terms of the worst thing you can do as a person is despair. Because one, that rejects the divinity of Christ because you're rejecting that you can be saved. Because if you're despairing, then you're saying that I reject Christ, right? That's probably, if not the greatest sin, one of the greatest sins, because I'm in despair. Okay, therefore you don't believe Christ can save you. You're completely under control of the forces, right? The dark forces. And then I think of evil in terms of causing human suffering and being anti-human.
So that's interesting. How do you fight? I mean, if you've got your head in the internet all day and the civilization that produced you is collapsing and evil is omnipresent and hurting people before your eyes, including people you love, how do you keep from despair?
Well, because the timelines are different, right? In our primitive minds, we think, oh, this is the worst. Everything's falling apart. No, it isn't. We're not even in Bolshevik era. We're not even in communist China era under Mao. We're not in the Cambodian genocide. So there's a lot of, and this goes back to maybe why Republicans are so weak. A lot of us have been so psychologically coddled that we view things as being insurmountable problems that we can't solve. I think it was Mao who said that Americans would break if there were ever a war in America.
Yeah.
We've never had World War II. Everybody was bombed. That was real despair. We were the guys over there helping the British bomb people, right?
Certainly.
In America, we weren't being bombed. Women had to go work at factories and other things, but it was nothing like Europe and their wars. So in America, we're so psychologically coddled that we think, oh, we're losing our country. You're always losing your country. Time does not stop. The world is not static. There's always forces being pushed. There's always a dialectic. There's always good versus evil. There's always been lower points in humanity and higher points in humanity. So we don't know where we are, even on the cosmic timeline, on God's timeline, on the demon's timeline, on the angel's timeline. We don't even know where we are, first of all. That's mistake number one, is that we are, in our own mind, gods, and we understand the moment that we're in, and we understand that the moment that we're in is so unique, and that there's a narrative arc happening that is either over and we've won, because you never win, or we're losing and, oh my God, we fall into despair. So the problem is, I call it like the Marvel movies capture this well. You don't watch TV or movies, and I can't even watch them because they're so formulaic. But the idea is, here are the people, bad guys come in, destroy things, hero emerges, good guys come in, good guys beat bad guys, good guys kiss the girls. The end, right? And that's what we love in the American mind. But if you looked at it and you zoomed out, not from that simple narrative arc that we love as Americans, you would say, well, now these buildings were blown up, people are dying, people have lost sons and daughters, people are wailing in agony in ways that we can't begin to comprehend. And you haven't even won, because there'll be another bad guy. There'll be another bad guy coming down, right? So you haven't, what do you mean you've won? The good guys won. No, the good guys have resolved the conflict in their favor, and now you have to rebuild, and then you're gonna have politics and people fighting as they rebuild. Who's gonna get the contracts? Who's getting ripped off? You have all these kids now that you have to watch out for. What are you gonna do with them, right? So when you think of it in that way, it can either make you despair more because you feel totally helpless. Oh my God, these problems are way worse than I thought. Or you realize, we're going through a thing, right? We're going through a thing. Okay, this is a bad thing we're going through. Let's see what we can do about it. So there's a term that I picked up from the ayahuasca kind of people in that little scene. And I think it comes from addiction. And they say the only way out is through, right? Yeah. And it sounds sort of glib. The only way out is through. What does that even mean? But it means when you're in the shit, you're in the shit. You're in the shit, bro. What do you want me to do? You want me to hold your hand? You want a milk and cookie? You want a little snuggle? You want a baby bottle? You're in the shit, bro. What are you going to do? Sit there and cry yourself to sleep? No, you just keep going. The only way out's through, right? So when you adopt that as the way you live, doesn't mean you don't have bad days, but you realize, I'm in the shit. Okay, what am I going to do? Call mommy, get a little blankie, maybe have a bottle, suck on my thumb a little bit. No, you're not going to do that, right? You just keep pushing through.
What's the closest you've been to despair?
I've been in despair in the human world over money. In hindsight, kind of laughably small amounts of money. But at the time when you don't have any, and you're like, I wasn't approved for student loans. I got approved for student loans, and then I didn't get approved. And then I thought I was going to have to drop out of law school because I couldn't get my student loans. And now looking back at it, I was like, what? I was bugging out over that, right? But at the time, that's your whole world. Yeah. So the smaller you define your world, the bigger your problems seem, right? So if you want to have less despair, the
smaller you define your world, the bigger your problems seem.
Yeah.
That is wise.
Yeah. So that, I look back at that now and I think, oh my God, I was borderline suicidal over just a financial problem. Like I could have just worked for whatever, right? There's 100 different ways to solve it. And so I had a ton of despair there. And then I've definitely had despair over, despair maybe is not the right word, but close to it, where we get Trump over the finish line in 2016 and he's going in, and all of a sudden the people who got him in there are pushed in the side, and all the people who opposed him take over. What do they say? That the people who start revolutions rarely finish them?
Yes.
And I thought, we're living this right now. And I was bummed, man. I was bummed that we took all these personal risks, that we made this happen, an impossible feat. And all of the people who were never Trump ended up in the administration, ended up staffing things. And that made you feel like despair maybe is less of a word than powerless, where you're like, we did the right thing. And sometimes you feel that way with these Republicans. You're like, we gave you Congress. We gave you Trump. We gave you the White House. We gave you Congress. We gave you the Senate. And we can't do anything. We can't do anything. Nothing is changing, right? Or we get the Republicans Congress in this last election, and they still send all the money to Ukraine. And you're thinking, what are you guys doing? They were confirming all these radical judges in the Senate, and they go, oh, well, Lindsey Graham is rubber stamping all these appointments. Well, block them in committee, do something, right? So you're, in a way, you're screaming into the void. Like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Why do I have all these gray hairs over this stuff?
Yeah.
And but again, that's me and my own ego defining the problem small, right? And then that's why, or defining the world as small. as everything is based on that one issue, and then that makes the problem seem bigger. Then I just try to zoom out, remind myself we're on a longer timeline. We're on the timeline of infinity. Do what we can do. That doesn't mean give these people a pass. But the despair sets in when you think, what more do we need to do? Right? We've given you guys everything. And even now with Trump world, Trump is going against the Project 2025 people. And those were his most loyal staffers. These are the adults in the room that he's going to need if he wins. And a bunch of never Trumpers are at his ear again and telling him to issue statements going against all of these people. And you realize, man, we're going to relive 2017. But Biden is so bad that we've got to vote for Trump. But the energy isn't the way it was. Like when we voted for Trump in 2016, we were not voting the lesser of evils. That was why a lot of people like me who didn't care about politics or didn't really care to vote got involved. Do I really care if it's John McCain, Barack Obama? 100% I don't. 100% I don't.
Fair.
Do I really care if it's Mitt Romney or Barack Obama? 100% I don't. Right? Because Mitt would have done more wars. So Obama would do things worse on social issues, but Mitt would have had us in war with Russia
immediately
if he could have. So you think, okay, do I care? Not really. Clinton versus Trump. We're talking about the fate of human civilization.
Yes.
I say this to this day, and I believe with all my heart that the people who voted for Trump in 2016 did the greatest act of human charity and maybe human history, because tens of millions would have died had Hillary Clinton won. They had their whole game plan, bro. They were going to go get in some kind of war with Syria. That would have led to some shootout with Russian mercenaries and American special operations troops. People like Joe Kent can explain all that. Eric Prince can explain all that. The table was set for World War III with Russia. We were able to delay that. So we were able to save.
Can I ask you just a dumb question, but why would anyone want a war with Russia? Like, what was that? So you're saying back even in 2015, 16, ghouls like Hillary Clinton were planning on war with Russia. Why?
Well, they need a big war. It's just big war.
But why Russia? Because
they're a legitimate power and it would be a real war. They were tired of these little tiny land disputes where we're winning. They need massive destruction. And
why?
Because they worship evil. They want more humans to suffer. If you look at war from yeah,
good answer.
I mean, so if you look at war and you start with the fundamental definition of evil and what evil is, then you would realize that the demons don't care which side of the war they're on. All they care about are humans are killing each other, right? That's their own agenda. So that's why when you hear people talk about things like, oh, we'll have a civil war in the U.S., I go, well, that's demonic. And you don't even realize you're under demonic influence. What do you think a civil war is like? Have you looked at what happened in Yugoslavia? You look at the aftermath of that. Show me you have a civil war and this is a good outcome, where this is something that you want to
never
idealize. Right. It's demonic. But they don't think that. They're like, we're the good guys and we're being oppressed by the bad guys. That is demonic influence. We're the good guys. They're the bad guys. And I, first of all, do believe we're the good guys. And I do believe that the other side is the bad guys. But once that leads you down that road, then the demons are smiling because they don't care. Oh yeah, you are the good guys. You're the moral. You're the righteous. They're the evil ones oppressing you. They worship demons. You're the good Christians. You need to go to war with them. You're still in that frame, right? So everything about human flourishing is trying to escape that frame, the framing of the anti-humanist forces, real or metaphorical. And then you realize that there are people who are obviously convening with these evil forces, consciously or unconsciously.
Do you think in some cases consciously?
I don't believe that, because there's not enough wisdom that you would have if you were convening with the entities. They would just,
good point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not something that you would know. Like, I can tell if somebody's been down that route and you're like, no, these people, they don't have.
How can you tell?
There's an infinite divine wisdom that you access when you pierce the veil between the man's world and the spirit world. And when you go over that veil or pierce through that veil, you are immediately humbled because you laugh at how much pride you might have had as a person.
Yes.
You think, oh, wow, I thought I was hot shit. Oh, I'm nothing here. I'm nothing here. Oh, my goodness. okay. And that's probably why it's able for me to become less relevant over the years, because the danger is then you become too egoless and you don't do anything, right? So
you
you're
become
always,
complacent. Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky, right? Am I living in pride? Am I living in boastfulness? Okay, I don't want to do that, but if you don't have a little bit of pride, you don't have a little bit of drive, you don't have a little sizzle, then maybe a message doesn't get across too. So it's constant, this constant tension, right? But the spirit world realm, they show me, oh yeah, I mean, it's tension. No, it's always tension. It's always duality, right? Yin and yang, if you look at the medical staff, two serpents, you look at DNA, two strands, there's always tension, which is why despair happens when you think that there's a final outcome in one way or another. And then complacency happens when you think nothing matters. And then hubris happens when you think that you've won and the game is all over.
Yeah.
And you don't realize Julius Caesar gets stabbed in the back by his friends and those supporters.
And great. The Cold War ended, but history has not ended.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so once you just embrace the dualistic struggle within yourself, then you realize, okay, I do need to do a little bit of this, but I can still struggle against the baser elements of myself.
I didn't mean to pull the conversation into another direction. So thank you for explaining that. 2016, if Hillary had won, millions would have died in the wars that she planned. I think that's absolutely right. Voting for Trump stopped that, at least for the time being. But you felt despair because you felt that Trump himself was subverted or allowed himself to be subverted by people who hated him, and it made you feel powerless.
Demoralized, yeah. It's probably a continuum. So despair would maybe be overstating it, but on the continuum, it'd be demoralization. And,
yes.
And where you think, oh man, I can't believe that. I can't. It's like if you got your kid a new car and the kid crashed the car right away while drunk driving. You think, why, brother, why? Right?
Yeah.
No, why? And but at a magnified intensity, yeah, because it was the country.
Most of us, well, actually all of us, go through our daily lives using all sorts of, quote, free technology without paying attention to why it's, quote, free. Who's paying for this and how? Think about it for a minute. Think about your free email account, the free messenger system used to chat with your friends, the free weather app or game app you open up and never think about. It's all free. But is it? No, it's not free. These companies aren't developing expensive products and just giving them to you because they love you. They're doing it because their programs take all your information. They hoover up your data, private, personal data, and sell it to data brokers and the government. And all of those people who are not your friends are very interested in manipulating you and your personal political and financial decisions. It's scary as hell. And it's happening out in the open without anybody saying anything about it. This is a huge problem. And we've been talking about this problem to our friend Eric Prince for years. Someone needs to fix this. And he and his partners have. And now we're partners with them. And their company is called Unplugged. It's not a software company. It's a hardware company. They actually make a phone. The phone is called Unplugged. And it's more than that. The purpose of the phone is to protect you from having your life stolen, your data stolen. It's designed from a privacy-first perspective. It's got an operating system that they made. It's called Messenger and other apps that help you take charge of your personal data and prevent it from getting passed around to data brokers and government agencies that will use it to manipulate you. Unplugged's commitment is to its customers. They will promise you, and they mean it, that your data are not being sold or monetized or shared with anyone. From basics like its custom Libertas operating system, which they wrote, which was designed from the very first day to keep your personal data on your device. It also has, believe it or not, a true on-off switch that shuts off the power. It actually disconnects your battery and ensures that your microphone and your camera are turned off completely when you want them to be. So they're not spying on you in, say, your bedroom, which your iPhone is. That's a fact. So it is a great way, one of the few ways, to actually protect yourself from big tech and big government, to reclaim your personal privacy. Without privacy, there is no freedom. The Unplugged phone, you can get a $25 discount when you use the code Tucker at the checkout. So go to unplugged.com/Tucker to get yours today. Highly recommended.
Have you felt despair in the last couple of years?
I mean, I felt despair in spirit travels during those sessions. Yeah, you get in touch with that human emotion of despair. You get in touch with the darkest side of energy and the more challenging parts of being a human, for sure.
But you're not driven to despair by the news on Twitter.
Oh, that's such a small potatoes compared to the spirit world. It's small potatoes. It's so trivial compared to the real war happening and the real forces at work that it's hard to even take seriously, to the point that I have to reel myself back in. But you do have to take it seriously, even if it is small stakes compared to the real conquest.
So what are the real stakes?
The real stakes is, one, on the individual level, you're a mortal soul. That's the real stake. The greatest challenge that I have every day is trying to sanctify my own heart and my own soul. Because what I've learned through various experiences and then reading a lot of the old Orthodox Christian wisdom and learning actually how Christianity was supposed to be, it was more, and why I never really resonated with Protestantism. If you want to go, I mean, so Protestantism, I feel like, is very mind driven. Here's a scripture. This is what the scripture said. I'm a Baptist. I can't drink alcohol. And somebody else would say, oh, well, Jesus turned water into wine. And you're fighting sola scriptura. You're fighting by citing different references in a book that is sometimes contradictory, right? And then, but the real spiritual traditions, remember, Christianity started out as a mystical tradition. We look at it now as, oh, here's the Bible, and the Bible's the word of God. And you realize, no, the Ethiopian Orthodox Christians have books of the Bible in there that you haven't even read, right? You guys are still fighting over whether the book of Enoch is real or not, right? What are you doing? You think you have the answer.
Is it? Do you think?
Oh, for sure. I think it is. And what I've learned is that you can learn from the heart. You have to learn how to think from the heart, rediscover beyond your own conscience, but realize that your heart has its own intelligence, which I thought would be woo-woo kind of laughable stuff, right? I'd read these books like The Four Agreements, Samuel Luis, I think his name is, Don Miguel San Luis. I would read Paul Coelho, and I would think, oh, what a bunch of pussies, right? Come on. I'm a man. I don't want to read about my heart. I don't want to read about crying. What a bunch of pussies. Who are these people, right? Honestly, that was my reaction and assessment of a lot of the stuff. And then I realized that was my own foolish pride, my own hubris. That I was realizing that I was afraid of the heart. I was not strong. I was weak. Because in my own mind, I convinced myself to hide from the heart, because the heart is the source of your pain, also the source of your great joy and love, right? So if you live in mind and you live in ego, you constantly paper over heart. And you think that's because you're strong. I'm a real man. I don't cry, right? Where'd that come from? You're a real man. You don't cry. Why are you afraid of crying? I'm not afraid of crying. That's an interesting reaction, right? So as you study the more of the mysticism and the real spiritual traditions and how it was practiced, then you realize that the heart is its own intelligence. And then you're trying to rediscover the intelligence of the heart. And once you rediscover the intelligence of the heart, that's the higher morality. The higher morality isn't the words we create, the rules we draft out. The higher morality is in your heart. But we become so disconnected and detached from the heart that sounds ridiculous, or it sounds like pussy shit, woo-woo pussy shit, right?
It doesn't, in my hearing anyway, but it does raise the vital question, what does good look like? You've described evil, but so how do we know that the impulses of our heart are the right impulses?
Yeah, good is love. Good is human flourishing. Good is flowers blooming. Evil is wheat fields being cut down in Ukraine as people kill each other. People who are brothers, separated by a line in the sand, kill each other. There's no flowers. There's no children dancing. There's no gardens flourishing, right? That's evil. That's death. Life is love, is human flourishing, flowers blooming, children laughing, right? C.S. Lewis once said that it was a great failing of his that he didn't find the laughter of children satisfying. He found it kind of annoying, right?
Yes.
And
he never had children.
Right. But even not having them, he realized that he was missing because that's heart.
Yes.
Heart is, you hear a kid crying on a plane. Oh, I hope the kid's all right.
Yeah.
me being an asshole, shut your fucking kid up. Don't you control your kid? You're weak,
Yeah.
That's the ego, the male. And it's that part of me that I was trying to get away from and that I've been still trying to get away from, right? The male egos worship me. I'm so great. I'm so relevant. Share my stuff, read my stuff. Oh, the president read this. I know this guy and this guy's important and da 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 da. That's the male ego. And that'll just spin you out of control forever. And then the heart is, man, I kind of snapped on my kid. I feel bad. I hope my kid's okay. I shouldn't have snapped on my kid. Why did I snap on my kid? Oh, because I was, in that moment, the kid was mirroring something about myself I don't like.
Well, that's the truest thing right there. Will you explain that a little more?
Well, and this goes back to even Aristotle, why we judge. And we often judge harshest in others, that which we don't like about ourselves. Yeah. But often we're in denial about those aspects of ourselves. And so we don't even realize that we're doing it. We're judging them because we don't like that part of ourselves. And you don't realize, no, it's that part of yourself that's broken. That's what you want to fix, right?
Yes.
That's what you want to think about. And unfortunately, not enough people talk about it, or it sounds woo-woo, or you get down a certain tradition, or you're...
Well, that's just the most obvious and real thing ever for every parent. I mean, if you like your wife, I speak for myself, when I see my wife's good qualities reflected in my children, I love it. When I see my bad qualities reflected in my children, it drives me crazy.
Right. And then what do you take away from that when that happens?
That, I should be more patient and less judgmental. And in fact, if a child is displaying one of your ugly qualities, you know what it's like to struggle with that quality. So you should be more compassionate. But of course, I was speaking for myself, I'm less.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that.
Right. So I think that some language that I found that was useful in what you're dealing with and deal with and what we'll always deal with for the rest of our lives is a lot of our work as parents is closing those loops of childhood trauma or closing the loop of whatever your issue is, right? Because the way we perpetuate mimetically our worst parts of ourselves is through raising our children, right? And what I try to think of is closing the loop. And when I see something in my kid that bothers me or triggers something in me, I think, well, why is that happening? And then I think, how can I have that child not continue this, right? How do you break that? How do you break that cycle? And how do you close that loop? And I think that becomes a lot more important than getting people elected into office. And I think if more of us did that.
Well, how do you do that? You see something ugly in your child that comes from you. You've transmitted something either genetically or through conditioning to your child, whom you love most in the world, of course, that is like bad. How do you fix that?
Well, the more you've learned about yourself, the more that you can transmit the knowledge to kids. So I'll give you a very basic example. My firstborn has first child energy, and that's very nice. First child energy is leadership, knowledge, often giftedness, inquisitiveness. She's always reading books. She had this little Rubik's Cube, and now she's saying, Dad, can we watch a YouTube video on how to solve the Rubik's Cube? All great energy, firstborn energy. But a lot of firstborn kids, because they're put into that role maybe that we as parents have to watch out for of being a caregiver for other children.
That's right.
We want to ask ourselves, one, am I robbing my daughter of the magic of childhood and the wonder of childhood? Hey, go watch your brother. I got to do this, right? Maybe I'm robbing her of the wonder of childhood. Okay, I need to calibrate that. Sometimes they do life is life.
Right.
Sometimes you have to do what you have to do, but at least I'm mindful of that. Or am I having her grow up too fast? Okay, why don't I just take a walk with her one-on-one? Just take a walk and just talk with my daughter, just about her. What's going on in her mind? Let her ramble on. Let her talk about what she finds interesting. Don't ask questions or try to direct the conversation. Just kind of like let it flow. And then when you're doing that, you're closing the loop because in my case, I was sort of robbed in my childhood in a lot of ways. And because I wanted to grow up, I don't want to get out of the situation. And you realize, no, you're letting them be a kid. We all have to live together, and it isn't perfect all the time, but you're letting a kid be a kid. Or another thing first children do is, because they have to look at the well-being of everyone, they'll negotiate against themselves, right? My daughter, I don't know if I want to ask for this, Dad. What do you want to ask for? She's like, well, I don't know if I should ask for it because I think my sister, I think, wants ice cream, but I really want this. And I would say, well, don't negotiate against yourself. ask for what you want. I can still tell you no. Maybe it won't work out, but let's close that loop, because I noticed that I would negotiate against myself sometimes in business dealings. And it was something my wife would point out, where, especially because I was never really like a greedy, money-driven person, a lot of times I would be more compliant than you would expect, giving my personality, right? Giving my personality, you might think, put $1 on the table and he's going to fight. Me, I'm thinking, why are we fighting over $1? This is stupid. Really, this is dumb. But people will take advantage of that, right? So I had to learn much later in life, unfortunately, into my 30s, and even now in my late 40s, I had to learn, no, you don't negotiate against yourself. Don't worry about them. They're worried about themselves. They're self-interested actors. They're going to try to get as much as they can out of you. Let them worry about themselves. You worry about yourself. And I realized, that's first child energy, because I was always worried about, is everybody okay? Is everybody doing all right within the family realm? Well, keep that to your family. So with my firstborn, I do want you to negotiate against yourself with the family. I want you to think about everybody with the family, but I want you to know what you're doing, and then have tools to know that when you're going into business or you're doing dealings with other people, put that energy aside, right? Be sharp.
How old is this child?
7.5.
Does she understand?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She's an old soul. Yeah. So a lot of my virtues, but a lot of my existential dread. I had a lot of existential dread at a very young age. So one day, for example, she was, maybe 5 or 6, but she was young. I remember she was young, and I was waiting for this and hoping it wouldn't happen. We were hanging out one day, and she goes, "Dad, I feel weird. Why do we have bodies?" And I thought, oh man, oh no. The genetic, whatever spiritual curse or blessing that has been passed on for all of these centuries or millennia is with her, because that was very much how I felt like a kid. I felt like, this body isn't mine. Why am I here? This doesn't make any sense. I've always felt alienated from my animalistic, materialistic body. I've always felt like it was weird that we had bodies. I was a Gnostic as an early kid. What is this thing what torture am I being subjected to by having to live in a body, right? And there was nobody I could talk to about this kind of stuff. They lock you up like a nut house, right? Sounds like a nutty thing. And I was like, so I told Sean, I said, well, she's asking these kind of questions now, but I'm able to treat them differently maybe than it would have been when I was a kid, or maybe than I would have been treated when I was a kid.
What did you say?
I said, it's weird, isn't it? What are these things flopping around? Right? It feels weird to be kind of disconnected and alienated from your body. And we're here on a spiritual mission. And that's why we're in these bodies. This bodies is part of the spiritual mission that we've been sent on since the beginning of time. And that we're on a spiritual mission to discover the mystery of the human bodies. We're on a mission to elevate humanity and to elevate the human condition. And you have these gifts, but along with that comes the responsibility to elevate the human condition and to elevate society. But that it is weird, and it's normal to feel weird.
You told your 7-year-old she had an obligation to elevate the human condition?
When she was 4.5. Oh, yeah.
Light times in the Cernovich household.
Yeah.
How did she respond?
She said, okay, Dad. Yeah, I don't know that she did, because I don't want her to wear that as a burden.
Of course.
Right, but she's like, okay, Dad.
How'd you get over, you were telling me at dinner last night, I won't betray anything, that's up to you, but I think it's fair to say you had a stupendously shitty childhood, like almost never really heard a story like that before. You wear it very lightly. You don't seem tormented by it. How'd you get over that?
Reading a lot of self-help books, and nothing deeper than that. Realizing that your past isn't what defines you. The lowest thing that happened to you isn't how you define yourself. And then that's what brought me into media. Was the brain is inherently, there's a great book on this, Wired for Story. We're obsessed with stories, right? Campfire, tell me a story.
Yeah.
Let's regale ourselves of stories. That's how we transmit knowledge, but with our own brain that gets hijacked because we tell ourselves certain stories and then we often frame them in the most miserable, disempowering way. So I define as the story of my childhood, man, that was wild. And I got out of there alive. What a trip. And you can define it that way. Or you can define it as, here are all these things that happened to me. I'm garbage. I don't matter. I'm scum. I don't deserve love. I don't deserve good things in life. And then you can define that as your story. And if you define that as your story, that's the path to despair. That's the pathway to depression.
So you made a conscious decision to see your childhood as this kind of maelstrom that you escaped and feel grateful for that?
It's this thing that happened to me. And then if I want to give into ego, it's a great thing that I overcame. Or if I want to forgive people and love people, I can say my dad worked shitty factory jobs, never cheated on my mom, never smoked a cigarette, never hit us other than the traditional spanking culture that existed at the time, never got drunk, he never did anything. And he did the best that he could with the knowledge that he had. And what a sacrifice did he have? And am I grateful enough as a son to appreciate that, to understand what it would be like to be broke, to be on welfare a little bit, with the shame that a man must feel when he loses a job? My goodness, what did my dad go through? So then I got on my own myopia. Remember, we always want to define the world larger than ourselves. The more we focus on ourselves, the smaller we define the world, then every problem is so big.
That's right.
Right. So then I think, oh man, how hard was that? And how generous was it that my grandparents paid off the mortgage of the house, because that was a $200 a month payment, which was a ton of money back then. And how different would my childhood have been? And how lucky am I that I got out? And how many things could have gone wrong in my life, and completely all through the course of my life. So, hey, buddy, you're so proud of yourself. You think you're such a great overcomer. How much luck was there? How much of that was divinely inspired? Maybe a little bit of it was. Maybe you need to get over yourself. Maybe you need to get over your little pity party and realize that things could have gone a lot differently, right? So I'm always consciously reframing the story of myself and the narrative of my life in a way that is zooming out wider and looking at what were other people's problems. What were they? You do? I mean, a friend of mine, you do ayahuasca. He was beat up as a kid, and he was, he had ayahuasca experience, and he saw himself getting beat up as a kid, and he saw his dad, but he saw that his dad was beat up as a kid, and he was like, "Oh my God, my dad was beat up as a kid. Holy shit!" That's why he did it. And it doesn't excuse the child abuse, but when you zoom out and you realize that was what has happened, then you don't blame yourself. And then if you don't blame yourself, you can forgive yourself, right? Because it's not that you're unworthy. It's not that you don't deserve love. It's that person felt that way, and they transmitted that knowledge in a really horrific way. And then you're allowed to forgive them, and then you're allowed to move on, and you're allowed to heal yourself, because it wasn't really your issue, right? And often these realizations it's very easy to talk about it like it's nothing, but when you're in the shit, when you're in the work, these are not easy conversations to have with yourself. So I get in the shit, and I go into those places, and I go into the darkest experiences that have happened to me. And then I do feel that torment. I do feel like I'm being attacked. And then, the only way out's through, and you just keep going through it.
In a world increasingly defined by deception and the total rejection of human dignity, we decided to found the Tucker Carlson Network, and we did it with one principle in mind: tell the truth. You have a God-given right to think for yourself. Our work is made possible by our members. So if you want to enjoy an ad-free experience and keep this going, join TCN at tuckercarlson.com/podcast, tuckercarlson.com/podcast.
What's going on with whites? And not just in this country, but in every white majority country, whites are becoming the minority. They're hated. They hate themselves. They're not reproducing. And the amount of energy expended by our leaders sort of openly disparaging them, encouraging them effectively to kill themselves or to want to kill themselves is overwhelming. I'm not saying this as a white man, though obviously I am. But it's very striking, and it's global. What is that?
I had a weird experience when I was in South Africa visiting. And in South Africa, you have a basically a cell. You lock yourself in a cell when you go in an apartment. So you get an Airbnb, you open the outside cage, you go in, and then you open another cage to go into the bedroom, and then you lock that cage. You have to have all of these layers of protection. And I remember talking to some white South Africans about that, and they go, oh, well, it's just payback for apartheid. And they shrugged it off. And I said, I can understand maybe a little bit of looting as payback for apartheid. I can understand a little corruption as payback, but horrific violent crimes is not a proportionate response to something that people did before you were even born. And ever since then, I've been struck with the mystery of this collective racial guilt that white people carry around that nobody else does. If you look at any other ethnic or racial group, no one carries around this strange guilt for sins that were committed before you were ever born. And I don't understand it. I don't understand where that comes from. I don't understand the biological basis for it, the spiritual basis for it, because carrying around collective guilt, racial guilt, is actually anti-Christian. It doesn't make any sense at all. And it's a knot that I haven't been able to unravel.
I mean, it does seem like they're disappearing, just like as a numbers matter. And even saying that is forbidden, which itself is really revealing. I mean, if this were true of, Comanches or Aleutian Islanders or Han Chinese, if they were diminishing in number really strikingly, really quickly over a short period of time, you'd be like, what the hell is going on with Filipinos? You know what I mean? They're not reproducing. Everyone hates them. They're dying. But even to say that about whites is like somehow bad or something. And that tells you that we've all internalized this hate white people thing. You really don't know where that comes from?
Well, a great example of that is that if you look at gun deaths, this is how they bring the stats on deaths. They go, oh, there's 50,000 gun deaths a year. When you look at it, it's suicide. It's almost exclusively white male suicide via firearm. And I always said that if you really cared about gun deaths, you would immediately do an intervention into white male suicide, because that is the primary usage of guns.
Do you know
suicides.
White men who've killed themselves personally?
Not personally, no. I know a friend who had an overdose with opioids, so I guess.
A form of it. I know a lot. I mean, I'm several years older than you, but I know a lot. I know like 5 at least. So yeah, that's interesting.
Right. So if you cared about gun deaths, you would know that the lowest hanging fruit is white male suicide, right? You would know that you're not going to confiscate people's guns. That would cause a lack of social cohesion that none of us even want to think about. All of that is fake. The real thing you would go after is gang violence, and you'd go after white male suicide. If you actually cared about gun deaths, you wouldn't point out the occasional tragic school shooting, which is statistically very unlikely, even though they're horrific when they happen. You would say, okay, we have a gun violence problem to solve. How are they being used? Okay, most of the people killing each other with them are gangbangers. And then you have white males killing themselves. Let's do an immediate, I mean, it's laughable to imagine this happening. In a world that were logical and not driven by hatred, you would see all kinds of interventions, public service announcements happening about white male suicide. It would be one of the biggest issues people talked about. You would say, did you have any idea? Most people don't. Most people think you're lying about the stats when you tell them, oh no, half of the gun deaths that they bring up are suicide, and white men are 3.5 times more likely to kill themselves than anyone else. And people go, that can't be true. Like, well, you can go.
The black women are the most oppressed group in the United States. That is an article of faith for everybody. We hear that literally every day. But the suicide rate among black women is like negligible.
Well, nobody's ever been able to square the circle of how media imaging suppresses the self-esteem of black Americans who have almost no suicide, but it's building up the white self-esteem, but then the whites are the ones killing themselves, right? There's no logic.
Right. So I guess that's kind of my point, is not to whine about it, because I hate whining about anything, particularly about race. However, it's so illogical, it's so like absurd that it suggests that there's something deeper going on, which is people are kind of happy when whites die. And that's obviously true.
Oh, yeah.